Hello and welcome to another episode of FEA's My Facility podcast, where we dive into the latest innovations, trends, and solutions in facilities planning and management. We will bring you conversations with industry experts, innovators, and thought leaders to help you navigate the challenges and opportunities in managing your facilities. At FEA, we're committed to building excellence where we live, work, and play. So if you're looking to stay ahead of the curve and improve your asset management strategy or facility financial planning, you're in the right place. So let's jump in and unlock the secrets to smarter facility planning in today's episode.
Welcome, Angela. It's great to see you again. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
So I know we've worked together for many years when you were at GSA focusing on education and training at the Public Buildings Service. Can you just tell us a little bit about the kind of work you did for GSA?
Sure. Yes. That's kind of a loaded question, only because I was there for so long and had a wonderful career path, and got to do so many different things. But in a nutshell, I came in as an intern right out of college, and it was a 2-year intern program. I have a finance degree, so I was going to go to the federal government and then leave after 2 years and be done. 22 years later, I was still there, and I got to work through many different organizations within GSA and more specifically PBS. So I worked as the PBS account manager, the liaison between HR and budget and PBS together. I worked as the national training program manager. I had a couple different program manager roles, and recently the last role I had was the chief of staff for PBS OFM, so Office of Facilities. Excuse me. There's gonna be a lot of acronyms, and I'll try to stop myself. But OFM is Office of Facilities Management.
Awesome. Yep. And that is where we were working together on that contract around training. And like you just said, you've had a lot of different things you've done with GSA over the years, and you've led some really huge programs, some with juggling competing priorities. And how did you decide what to tackle first and what you wanted to prioritize? And how were you able to stay focused when things were getting really hectic?
That's a good question. I think now, looking back on your career, if I was asked this first in, I would have no idea how to answer. But with the experiences that I've had, and especially in PBS and OFM, so I think consistently, as we all know, with facilities and buildings, there's always something going on. So there's always competing priorities. It's always hectic. There's always something that needs to be done right now. So for me, it was really trying to answer the question of what our mission was, GSA and PBS specifically. How does this challenge or problem or whatever we're looking to fix improve our ability to deliver safe, sustainable, and productive work environments for federal employees? Obviously, if it was a public safety or compliance, something that we had to do, that goes to the top of the list. So that's a no-brainer. So after you have all of those, what do you do next? I always think about the impact, the urgency, and then the getting it done. So impact for me, working as in central office. So when I say central office, we had 11 regions. So there were folks dispersed throughout the United States. And so different geographical regions that we supported. So how many folks would this affect? What buildings would it affect? Kind of ranking those priorities. The urgency, obviously there's usually a time sensitive kind of urgency to any project. We learned a lot, as the whole world did with COVID, of what we did yesterday is not going to work tomorrow. So thinking about that and where does that go, and then getting it done, which is the hardest thing. What resources do you have available to execute right now? What does that look like? Can you pull in other team members? Do you have the staffing and the workload to be able to manage those projects? So I think that those three things really help you kind of focus your list on what you do first and the competing priorities. And then for me, the second half of that question is, what do you do when things get hectic? I am a very detail oriented person, and I like to talk. So, excuse me, structure and communication is key for me. Structure, once you've chosen the projects, I had structured touch points. Whether it was weekly sessions, bi-weekly touch points with senior leadership, with performance reviews, making sure you build in time for feedback so you get that buy-in and the credibility for whomever you're supporting is really important. And this is something that's harder to learn, but you do as you go through your career. But delegating, creating the teams that you have and letting them help you. It's no fun if you create the teams, but then you're still doing all the work. You're still hectic and kind of crazy inside. So empowering your team to help you lead whatever it is that you're doing. I did that all the time with all of my national projects and all of my regional coordinators there. And then for me, giving yourself space to think, whether you think out loud the way I do a lot of times with talking, kind of talking through with somebody, hey, this is what I'm doing, what do you think? Or just kind of blocking off your calendar and saying, this is my thinking time. So that's how I would keep focused when things got hectic. It really just kind of just summarize, I guess, everything. It helps when you're grounded to a purpose. So in my case, in facilities, it's helping others and making your buildings better or your systems smarter. I am not a building manager by trade, nor will I ever be, but I think I'm really good at putting myself in other people's shoes and figuring out what would be easier and how to focus on that. And that really helped with my priorities as well.
That's really neat. I mean, from what you said too, it sounds like you're doing a lot of putting people first. So like you said, putting yourselves in their shoes and trying to think about getting them engaged early in the process and everything. And I bet the teams really appreciated that.
They did. And it was, you starting out, it was like, well, I don't know. I'm not a building manager. I can't do this, but you can, right? We've all sat in a building. We've all done this. So putting people first and what's going to be the most helpful has always been a great strategy for me. But I'm sure though, Maureen, on the flip side, like you've been in really high pressure situations where you have competing clients instead of competing it's still priorities, but dealing with your clients and their major challenges. What is your approach when the clients come to you with their hectic brain and they're overwhelmed, and how would you guide them through it?
Very similar to what you talked about with the mission, figuring out what's going to have the most impact. We do a lot of work with organizations where we're looking and talking to them about the organization's vision and making sure that what they're doing is aligned with that vision so they can have the most impact in the organization. But honestly, I find that sometimes people just need a place to start, right? That when you feel overwhelmed and you have so much going on, you get kind of paralyzed, just thinking what to do next. So we come in and we can say, okay, start here. Here's 4 things you can do in the next 3 months and just focus on that. So, the other thing that we hear from clients a lot in facility management is they're struggling with how to keep up with training in their team. Facilities is often a place that gets cut first. And then training is usually the first that gets cut out of that. But they're also dealing with more complex buildings, more technology. So you do need to keep up with training. And I know with you having led a training program for a large organization, how did you build that training culture to get people to, especially leadership and others, to really be engaged with that and know that it's important?
Sure. This is, you've hit one of the things that I truly enjoy is helping people and training and developing. And when your organization or agency or whatever business does not have a training culture, it's a really hard barrier to break through. While GSA and PBS, we always had training and folks have to go to training, it was never really embedded into our organization. It was never part of why maybe someone would work here, or at least in my opinion, it was not, I'm going to go here because they spend so much time, building up their people, ensuring that they do this. And so from the outside, I saw this, and that's when I came to to work with PBS and OFM to create their national training program. So what you really need to do is find out what's missing. A lot of the things that folks do is, all right, well, we've done this training for years. We'll put it out there again. So it's not about looking at everyone's schedule and saying the X, Y, and Z company has these 3 classes, let's do it. It's really where are your biggest skill gaps and what's holding us back from achieving our mission. Skill gaps and monitoring your environment and your employees is a whole nother beast to tackle. But if you're fortunate enough to do that, it's so telling about where you thought your gaps might be, but they're actually not.
Yeah.
We got to do that with you all and some of our folks with our FBPTA, our Federal Buildings Personnel Training Act. And so we use that as kind of our standards to build what that looks like. So we wanted to make our training relevant, targeted, and for me, my favorite part is measurable with the data. So obviously that's the simple part. Everyone can have the idea, but then how do you break into the organization and leadership and get the buy-in on board, like you said? I think some of the other things that are very important is building ownership nationally, locally, regionally, however an organization may be broken up. Since we were at the top, it was harder to infiltrate that message down to everybody and make sure that it was filtered in the way that we wanted it to be. So for me, it was consistency. It was always communicating, over communicating, extra communicating, and sending out messages. You want to ensure that everyone gets the message somehow, some way, because playing telephone doesn't usually always work. So it's really getting to the folks that have the boots on the ground. So my folks in the regions that were my SMEs and my subject matter experts, my contacts, I was like, you guys can help me. You're going to help me with this, convey the messages and pass it along. You're going to help me with this telephone chain and make sure we're doing the right message. You also want to make sure that the training you offered is visible and valued. Again, you don't just want to offer the training just because you've done it in the past. You want folks to feel ownership in their own development. So what does that mean? Just because you work here doesn't mean you're automatically going to get training. Is there training out there? Yes, but where do you want to go, Maureen? Like what did you want to do? Maybe you worked on a project and you found something else that you enjoyed. So we did that. I did that. I created a newsletter that started going out monthly that said all the new trainings, what we were doing, just kind of highlights what's happening. There was usually some form of feedback, some form of like a comment section, and it also had a link to our training calendar. So no matter where you looked, you could find it, whether it was the calendar, the newsletter. Eventually we created a website, and I really monitored the feedback. I looked at, here we go again with the data. I looked at the data and the analytics of how many people opened my newsletter, how many people clicked on this, how many people clicked on that. And then when I did ask a question and wanted feedback, I'd make sure to address it in the next newsletter. So making sure that people were feeling valued and that the training was visible for everybody. I think two other things beyond all of that is you go beyond compliance. I've basically said this already. It's beyond checking the box. For us, you want to inspire improvement. So we always said operational excellence. So you want to elevate your entire workforce, not just a little group here that might need their OSHA training or a group over here that might need this. It's really entirely your whole workforce. In PBS, we are fortunate enough to create our own in-house flagship courses. And these courses were directly related to a response to an audit. So it wasn't, big theoretical ideas. It was like, this is what happened at GSA, and here's how it might affect you. Here's how we can fix it. We used real life, real-time buildings, real-time problems, real-time data during the class. So it was more relatable for all of our folks, which I think helps as well. When employees can see things being tied directly to themselves, their job, operational excellence, they'll take it seriously, and because with their day-to-day work. Last but not least, obviously you have to track things and use the data and the numbers, and this is where you can have fun with everything. We implemented success metrics and we tracked participation, we tracked back to our KPIs, we tracked back to course feedback, anything that you can think of, you need to track so you know where your improvement is and how you meet your workforce needs. So it takes time.
Yeah, and I think, your program that you had developed and the FPPTA and the support that that provided, being able to do those skills assessments to really understand this is what our group of people need more training in. And I really enjoyed developing the curriculum. Like, I do a lot of adult education, teach for IFMA and BOC and others, and developing the course was so much fun. And I've really found that that was something I really liked a lot and would like to do more of. And I remember the first class. Remember the first class we did in person in San Diego, and you were there, and you were able to convince leadership that, hey, this class, it's a 3-day class, needs to be done in person. When travel was, budgets were cut, and it was just post pandemic or right towards the end of the pandemic. I'm trying to remember exactly when, but
I think it's right when everyone was just starting to travel again.
yeah, and those people were so happy to see people. They hadn't seen them in years because it was like a whole region coming together. And I just remember how happy people were just to be with people again, and to get in-person training was like a real treat.
Sure. And that brings up a really good point. We could talk about this for hours, but the in-person training, the network and camaraderie you build that way as well. And I think how you said a lot of those folks hadn't seen each other. And then we had you all delivering the training, and it wasn't just this, talking head up here. Like, you all knew our buildings, you've been to our buildings, you used real world example. We had training videos. So really just showing the value of that training. And it was really cool to see everybody's face light up and to be able to deliver that. And just the questions that you get. We all know we can zone out on Zoom, and you're like, oh yes, I'm gonna pay attention. It's very hard.
Yeah.
No matter who you are or what grade you're in or how old you are.
Yeah.
That is hard. So having that real life connection is key, honestly.
And that, probably was one challenge where you were trying to get leadership to understand the importance of going back to in-person training. And even, like you said, having facilitated training with educators, with instructors versus with SMEs, because people who are really, really smart and know stuff, not always can be someone who teaches.
Right.
And I'm sure in your role, especially later in your career, that you had a lot of those challenges where you had to try to get leadership on the same page. What are some of the tips you have from your experience in managing stakeholders throughout the organization, especially getting leadership on the same page?
Sure. I think this happens a lot, when you put it that way, right? Getting everyone on the same page. For me, for facilities, again, I was not, and nor am I, a facilities operational specialist. I'm not a building manager. I've never, excuse me, owned any part of that knowledge. So leadership is usually focused on the big picture, the long-term planning. But then you have your folks, like you said, our SMEs, who know every detail to every little thing, could tell you how to take apart any kind of machinery and put it back together with their eyes closed. So how do you put those two together? And it's really bridging that gap. And I think that was something that I really enjoyed throughout my career, was being the translator, the connector, the advocate. I always say, one of the get to know you questions is, if you had a superpower, what would it be? That one's a little bit harder to answer, like on a personal level, but on a professional level, I think my superpower was being able to help the two groups connect the dots. And again, here I am back to data, but I love to tell story with data. I think that's where my career has really evolved, in terms of I enjoy helping people. I enjoy that side of the business, but I also enjoy the numbers and the story. If I am a building manager and I'm looking for new maintenance, new equipment, new contracts. What if I'm senior leadership? I'm not going to say yes without showing some sort of evidence that you've done your research and what you're saying or proposing is actually a good idea.
Yeah.
So you have facts, you have a case, you can really, like I said, tell that story with data. I say I'm a good listener. I hope I am. I know, Maureen, you are an excellent listener. So I feel like you've had a lot of folks who probably come to you that say like, this, I'm fed up with this, or I don't want to do this, or I don't know how to do this. Like you're totally disengaged, either because leadership said we're starting this new project and they don't want to, or they're frustrated, or some kind of constraint. You have your skeptical and disengaged clients or team members that come to you when launching something new. Like, how do you work through that?
Yeah, it's, you said it with relationships. I think that really is a big part of it, that you're coming at it from a point of trust and credibility. You have to have a little bit of that credibility for them to take you seriously. You have to really try to get them to understand the why of what you're doing. And if they're not believing in the end result, that mission, it's really, really hard. People have to have some stake. The two things between, they have to understand why, and they might not always fully agree with your why, but at least if they can comprehend the why, then you can like start to nudge them towards through that process of change. So I think all the things you've talked about between communication, the relationships, and then the data, I think is where people will start to trust and say, well, gosh, they're actually listening to me and they're making decisions based on some of the things we're saying. I think that really, really does help bring people into the fold.
Sure.
Well, thinking about what you've said today and your career, you've had so many different facets of your career. You bring a lot to the different jobs you've had, and you've moved up in organizations, and you've coached and trained a lot of people through your career. So I'm curious what advice you might have to help people think about how they can move up, how they can start to think more strategically and maybe get into leadership roles.
Sure. It's interesting you asked that, because as I mentioned, I came in through an internship program, and throughout the 2 years you're in the program, they talk to you about being a leader and getting to the senior level and doing X, Y, and Z. And when you're sitting there fresh out of college, you're like, no way is that ever going to be me. I don't know how I'm going to get there. And that, right, everyone has strategies on what worked for them and so on and so forth, which is kind of what you're asking. But for me, I think there's a couple things. I think you need to feel ready to make the shift. You need to, for me, from being the worker bee to more of the manager decision maker, that's a really hard shift to do. So you got to kind of have your perspective right into what you're looking for. As a technical expert, you're all obviously in the weeds, you know everything, and then you have to go to the leader to take a step back. So I would say zoom out before you zoom up. Before you think about going up the ladder, let's zoom out. Is this something that you want to do? Are you good at connecting the dots, or do you enjoy being the SME? And then that's okay. Do you enjoy being the subject expert? That's fabulous too. But if you're kind of itching to get the little bit more, and you've asked the questions, or you've been pulled into meetings and you're like, I've heard this and this, maybe we should try something like that. Not just the how questions, but the why questions. Like, why are we doing this? Why this? I've always said to ask a lot of questions. And Maureen, as you know from working with me, I do ask a lot of questions, and they're usually not to challenge anybody about what they're saying. It's really kind of just that's how I think. So you have to think broader and ask the questions. So zoom out, look at what you have, and before you think, oh, I'm just going to be the senior leader and that's what I want just because you're supposed to. Also with that, we always talk about left brain and right brain, and using your extroverted muscle and your introverted muscle. So kind of developing your influential muscle. What today leadership is about It's more about influence and talking to things and having the stories and the relationships. And you're not so much at your desk and working and just heads down work. So you have to be able to take that step to translate all of your experiences into stories and strategies that can help you make decisions. And along with that experience, like, think outside your lane. Everyone likes to say stay in your lane, but sometimes it's good to get out of your lane. That's where I've grown the most, honestly, is being in a meeting and hearing somebody say something and that's a really great idea. Do you mind if I help? Or coming back later and said, I heard what you said. I was thinking about it. Like, what would you think if we did something like this? Whether you get to do it or your idea is heard, going across your lane, staying sometimes out of your boundaries is really what helps you grow and develop and get noticed.
I think that's so important. And I just did a podcast with another guest, David Thomas, who throughout his career, he had a really interesting career too. And that's exactly what he said. He said, I always went to the people who knew what I didn't. And I asked questions. I said, can I work with you? Can I do this? So that he could learn different things. And after that, I think myself a lot too, that throughout just being able to say yes to something that you don't know, like even that business continuity, I had not even heard of business continuity before they said, hey, can you help us get ISO certified in business continuity? And I was like, sure. What is it? Right.
Right.
And it's
Saying
just,
yes.
okay. If you like to ask questions, if you like to learn, then being outside your lane sort of feels good. It can be exciting. So I think that's such a key thing. I'm really glad you brought that up. Well, that's great. Is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
I think I've said this a few times, but ask the questions, be communicative, and just like you said, be open and help folks understand and build those relationships. Really, it's relationships. Maureen, you and I have this relationship, which is why I'm here today. So relationships are key for sure.
Yeah. Well, we so appreciate you coming today.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Angela.
Thanks, Maureen.